On behalf of Burlington English, I welcome you all to this session on Error to Excellence, Practical Approaches to Grammar Correction. I'm Meena, and we have with us today Ambika, who will be taking us through this interesting topic. Ambika is a Cambridge certified English language trainer with an extensive background of over 15 years in communication. And she has worked with and trained various nationalities like Russians, Brazilians, Spanish, and Burmese, to name a few. So hope you have a wonderful session. Over to Ambika.
Thank you, Meena. Good evening, everyone. Really nice to see so many people buzzing on the chat. Good evening to everybody who's been saying good evening, ma'am, and good evening, and putting your names in there. Thank you, guys. So I'm kind of already feeling quite positive that we have such good interaction on the chat. Keep that going during this session. And today, we're going to look at the approaches that we can actually do during error correction, specifically during the grammar lessons. And to ace the error correction approaches is what's going to be our agenda today. And this is a little bit of a gist on what our session is going to go about. First, we'll identify why the students make errors. Then who should be the inspector of correcting the errors, and how do we go about, which is basically your approaches, and when should we correct the errors. And once we do that, we'll also do a little bit of an activity where we review a little into the grammar terminologies related to pronouns. We'll also see how we can apply these things and techniques into our teaching. And most likely, you would understand that, certain things suit you the best. Certain things, maybe you can give it a little try in your own classes. So let's dive into the reasons part of the errors. So before that, quickly on your chat boxes, can you let me know how do you usually correct your students? Let's stick to grammar part. So in grammar, how do you usually correct your students? I'm going to give it another 30 seconds so you all can type. Okay, you give the right answer. Thanks, Radhika. Underline, rectify, okay. Practical exercise, sentence making, okay. Telling them the errors, okay. Great. Corrections and solutions, Yes, I think pretty much we've got the gist of what you're saying. So, which means we explicitly show them that this is the error and we correct it. So in the approaches that we're going to look today, we're going to explore a lot more into just explicitly giving them the error and correcting it. We are also looking at developing the critical thinking. Okay, so I hope that in this session, you're going to take back some really good approaches to make the error corrections. So before we go into that, do you know what is the difference between an error and a mistake? So I've put two definitions here, which is A, one definition, and B. Can you tell me if A is error or mistake and B is error or mistake?
I think I know which one is which, but I would like to see first see what the participants think.
Let's see the teachers.
Yeah.
So do you think A could be an error and B could be a mistake, or B could be error and E could be a mistake? Okay, we're getting answers here. One person thinks A is an error, A error. Okay. That's quite a mixed set of answers. So there are...
Somebody has said A is a mistake.
Yeah, so many of... In fact, there's like two.
Yeah.
So many people have said... okay. Meena, what do you think, Meena? What's your guess?
My guess is that A, since we have the knowledge but we are producing the language incorrectly due to lack of attention or carelessness, could be a mistake. Because we are, we already know the concept, but still we are making a mistake. And when you produce a language incorrectly due to lack of proper knowledge, that could be an error.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for that, Meena. So, very well explained as well. So, the first one is the A is the mistake, and the B, the lack of understanding of a rule, is where your error comes. And that's what we're going to be addressing today mainly. Okay, and mistakes can also be small slips here and there. You know the spelling of a word, and then you by mistake do the EI instead of IE. Those are called your slips. So these kind of slips are very natural for students to make. So slips and mistakes are, you know it, but you made a mistake. But errors are because you don't know it. Okay, so this is the part that we're going to be focusing a lot more today. And let's see, why do your students make errors? So in the chat box, let me know, why do you think your students make errors? What's the reason for errors? Lack of understanding, nice. Confusion, absolutely. No idea about concept, yeah. Lack of attention, yeah. Yeah, listening, okay. Confusion, terminology, language barrier, absolutely. I like the lack of confidence. Great. Overconfidence. I like that one, Kirti. Okay, not a yes. I think you all have covered my first few parts of it, right, Meena? In terms
Yeah, but
of
can I also ask you something, Ambika?
sure.
Can first language influence or the mother tongue influence be also one of the reasons?
That's right on
Because
top.
I'm
In fact,
right.
that's
Because
something that's right on top.
yeah, because sometimes I think we tend to, students may tend to translate
Yeah,
translate the sentences as they speak in their mother tongue. So that could also
absolutely.
influence what I
In
thought.
fact, Meena, I've seen that more so in the two-tier cities where the children are not exposed to speaking English at home. If there are children who speak English already at home, you may not find this that commonly. But in
Okay.
two-tier cities where they learn English as a subject, then you will definitely be finding
Yeah.
such kind of errors. And yeah, go on.
And also sometimes I think we do become used to, or we get accustomed to repeatedly using incorrect sentences while speaking.
Yeah.
So
I'm actually
even
going to
though,
address that part as well.
hmm,
Yeah. So, in fact, I think lack of knowledge, lack of confidence is absolutely something that all of you have said. But I have one more thing here, which is something that is very, very common among students, overgeneralization of the concept or overgeneralization of the rules. So, in English, although we all really hate that there are so many exceptions in grammar, it's unavoidable. So, what happens is, for example, let's take the possessive pronouns, which says, Mary borrowed my book and John took hers. So, instead of hers, they might just change it a little bit into his, where what happens is because it's John, they just put the male gender, possessive into the place instead of putting the female, which is hers. And another common one is also the apostrophe. They might say hers with an apostrophe, which becomes hers is, instead of saying, hers, HER, without an apostrophe. So those kind of rules are the overgeneralization. So it's very evident that, a lot of people make errors because they think the rule is right through the same. And the next one is what Meena briefly addressed earlier, which is the fossilization. So repeatedly saying the same thing kind of makes us feel that it's correct. For example, half of the people who, when they speak, they say, me and him went for a movie, instead of saying, he and I went for the movie. So me and him, me and my sister, me and my dad, this me and my is so commonly used that it becomes to be a fossilized error in our heads. It's always first the other person, my dad and I, not my dad and me. So my father and I. So that kind of fossilization of error is also a very, very common reason why kids make errors. And last is a slip that we addressed earlier as well. It's just mainly because you know it, but you didn't remember it at that point of time, or you just like had a small glitch in what you did. So I'm going to show you guys a cartoon right now, okay? And I want you to guess what is the reason for error in that cartoon. Here you go. Can you tell me what the reason is for the error in this cartoon? Let's get some answers, teachers. I'm just going to give it another 10 seconds. What do you think the reason of the error is? You can just keep guessing.
Verb.
Teacher,
Yeah, there is a
okay, very
response,
good.
Ambika, that
Yeah,
verb is not taught.
yeah, good.
Perhaps verb is not
That's
taught,
a
and
verb,
that could be the
absolutely.
reason.
Absolutely. Absolutely, guys. So here, I think it's very, very evident. Yes, Harpreet, thanks a lot. The evident reason is lack of knowledge. Like the child has no idea what a verb is. What's the point teaching the child what an auxiliary verb is or questioning him on an auxiliary verb? So lack of knowledge is the reason why it is not knowledgeable to the child. Like the child doesn't know what it is. And now, going in further, how we are going to approach it as who corrects the errors. So tell me in your class, who corrects the errors? Who is the person who is, let's say, the grammar police? All, okay, students, teachers, very good. I like that mix of answer. Other kids who know it, fantastic. Absolutely, fellow students. I really like that you're making it a very interactive process for error correction. Teachers, yes, very good. So, in fact, today we're going to also see who do you think needs to be the grammar inspectors or the error correction facilitators, let me put it that way. So, like many of you said, we can actually give the responsibility to the students as well. But let's see how we can go about it. Because for that, also, you need a way of executing this plan. You can't anyway just make them correct it, right? So, I have this small paragraph right here. And I would like you to read this paragraph and identify the errors in this. And if you see here, there are numbers on to the left-hand side, which is basically your line numbers. So in the chat box, you can just probably put the line number and what kind of an error comes. For example, the first one I can just help you with. I enjoy spending time outdoors. Me like walking in the park. The error is quite evident. I like walking in the park. Exactly. So similarly, let me just give you probably 2 minutes to see if you can come up with the errors in the sentences from 1 to 15. Okay, you have 2 minutes to do this. Great. So I'll be observing the chat box, so don't worry. So I am seeing that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Nice.
Yes.
Fantastic. Meena, such a interactive bunch of teachers, I say.
Yes.
Fantastic answers as well. We've got all
Actually,
English.
they had started writing the answers at the beginning, even before you completed the
I
instructions.
completed my instructions. Yes. I mean, that's a very teacher thing to do, right? You see the mistake, you just have to correct it. Okay. Great. So, most of you have already addressed this. Can you see the answers now? Absolutely. Make me happy, make me comfortable. Yes. Very good. Absolutely. So, if you notice here, can you tell me, is there a pattern in the errors? Is the student having a problem with any particular concept? Very good. Okay. Is there pronoun? Yes. Absolutely. specifically for I and me. Yes, thank you. Yes, there is a very, very identifiable pattern in this. Superb. Absolutely. So here, if you notice, there is a big confusion between me and I. And if you notice, they're also using me repeatedly. And the second last one, the me, has a extra E, which basically is your slip. Although the person knows the spelling, that's a slip. Okay. So, in such a case, let's look at how we are addressing the corrections, which the first part, which you all have already mentioned regarding the teacher led correction or explicitly correcting. Definitely, that has benefits because it comes as a problem solving instinct. The first thing is you see a problem, you solve it. So, the teacher see an error, the teacher corrects an error. And in this way, you can see that when there is a common error in the classroom, you can immediately pick the common thing and then correct it. And you can also highlight it on your whiteboards or your boards and show the meaning, show how it is formed in a sentence, do the usual grammatical split there and go about it.
This also
And
gives them an immediate feedback, right? The students get an immediate feedback on their work.
absolutely. So it's like the minute you see the error, you get the feedback. And do you think there's any issue with this, Meena? Any
Yes,
problems
I
in this?
think it could be. See, I think for most teachers, it could be very time consuming because the
Mm.
classroom size in our country is mostly 35 to 40 children in one class, so minimum. So
Mm-hmm.
that could be a problem. And could over dependence on the teacher be a problem?
Absolutely,
Because
absolutely.
maybe the children
So,
will, depend upon the teacher to tell them, point out the errors. They may not start thinking by themselves.
absolutely. And what happens is that can kind of, so for a teacher, another thing that we always have noticed with teachers is when we see errors, we don't just stick to that particular target language. Suppose I'm taking a class on possessive pronouns, and I've seen errors in possessive pronouns, but there are errors in the tenses also. So immediately my attention would go into correcting the possessive pronouns and tenses. So what happens is we just flood them with corrections. So that could be a little bit of a problem. So there we need to address what is really required. Okay. And this is a teacher led correction. Now let's go into something that you all have addressed, the student correction, which I also call as self correction. So, any idea what CCQ means in this bracket that I've given you guys? Have any of you heard of this terminology, CCQ? If you've attended the previous sessions, I'm sure somebody would pick this up. So, that's your concept checking questions. So, what you could do for self correction is also give your students a set of questions. Instead of just giving them the answer right away, you can give them a set of questions which gets them to think. What, yes, Ruma, thank you. So, which gets them to think as to what is the rule and how do I apply it in my correction. So when you give them a question like this, you get them to answer the questions in class, then give them the question as a rule book to correct their answers. So there you're facilitating self-correction. You're not doing the correction, but you're facilitating them to correct it. Another, if suppose you feel that a concept checking is a little bit challenging for your group of students, you can also do the easier way where you give them the rules and ask them to see if the rules and the corrections are correct. So, can any of you tell me whether there is a negative in this situation? Do you think there is an issue with such a situation? When somebody is just giving them the rules or when somebody is just giving them the CCQ in your chats? Is there a problem with this? Okay. Meena, what do you think? Is there a issue with this, or what do you think is the benefit? Probably.
Benefit, I think the ownership, it can build confidence because
Yeah.
they will start correcting their own mistakes. So it
Yeah.
can take ownership of their learning, and teacher can also get a better understanding of the students' learning in the
Absolutely.
class, and it saves a
Absolutely.
lot of time as well.
I
But I do
agree.
think there could
So,
be an
no, I don't
issue.
agree there, Meena. There, I think I'm going to a little bit, have
Okay.
a slightly difference of opinion because one of the teachers have also pointed out saying it's time consuming. So, I'm going to address that part as well.
Okay.
So, yes, it is time saving in higher classes. In higher
Yeah.
classes, the only thing I want to add, it is time saving, but you need to have enabled your students to that level where you are able to trust them with the corrections. So, probably in smaller classes, self correction can be quite challenging. Like somebody pointed out in the chat that, I'm not really sure whether the children will be able to do that. Yes, and
And
yeah,
And Ambika, I think in the smaller classes, it can also demotivate the children, because if they do not understand, I mean, if they cannot
absolutely.
understand the rules and they cannot identify their mistakes, it can demotivate them.
Yes, yes. But I think one of the main advantages of this is you are enabling your students to change or correct themselves from a very, very young age. So, what happens is whenever they see an error, once you guide them with the rules, then they know where to really fall back, how to really correct it. So, some people rightly point out, Vivek, yes, it might not be appropriate for a very primary or a small class, but definitely as you go higher classes, enable them to do this because that's what's going to, help them even in future language learning journey. And in terms of the issues, I think we already addressed it. There might be possibilities of students getting demotivated. And let's look at peer correction. So, peer correction also, in a very simple form, you could do the similar thing as what we did for self correction, either give the rules or you can even just give the answer key and ask them to quickly check. So, in this way, I think it could be beneficial because one teacher can just stay a step back, be a facilitator, and then just monitor whether the correction is getting done. And here it kind of encourages a collaborative learning approach. You're not, alone when you're learning. And somehow I feel it's much easier when your friend tells you that there is a mistake than, being corrected explicitly. So in that way, it also helps. Okay. And the small con, in fact, I'm all for peer correction because I think it's a very, very good advantage for the teacher because the teacher gets to know who knows what, who's a strong learner, who's the learner who can lead and take. I think definitely I vouch for peer correction. And the only small, glitch I do find is they may be people who have more than just the correction. They want to know why this is wrong, then the student might not be able to explain. That's when I think the teacher's monitoring is very important because you see that any student is struggling with explaining why it's wrong, immediately budge in and then help them with that. So
Yes.
even though you are not correcting, your role as a facilitator and a monitor of the feedback is extremely critical here. So now let us look at teacher led. What is your opinion, guys? So, teacher led versus self versus peer. Which technique do you guys prefer? There's a question how to minimize the risk of overcorrection. Yes, Anukriti, I think that is something we definitely need to work on as teachers. We have to focus on target language. Let's not, like when you're teaching, let's say tenses or pronouns, because we're doing pronouns now, pronouns, if it's possessive pronouns, don't go into correcting all the other grammatical aspects of the things or the vocabulary. Stick to your target language of the class, of the lesson. So in that way, overcorrection can, be a lot more controlled, is what I would say. Yes, I like your answers. Yes, absolutely.
Most of them seem to prefer peer correction, whereas
Yes,
some of them have told a mix of two or three, or all three of them.
absolutely. Great. Awesome. So now we're going to look at how we are doing, how or the approaches towards. We now saw who has to correct it. Now we're looking at approaches that as a teacher, how can you do the error correction without just putting it on the board or underlining? What are the different techniques that you can use when it comes to your error corrections? So these are a few things that we'll be looking at today, which is your meta-linguistic feedback. And don't worry about the terminologies. I'm going to take you through everything in detail with the pros and cons of both. And these techniques definitely are something you can put to practice right away in your classrooms. Okay, so we're going to be facilitating with the approaches for you to do this. So before we go in, I'm going to do a little bit of an activity again with you guys because you're a very interactive bunch and I'm quite excited about that too. So I have here the definitions in very brief manner about the techniques that are posted on the previous slide. One is eliciting, the other is reformulation, metalinguistic feedback, and clarification request. And I have here samples of each. Okay, A, B, and C and D are samples of each of these type of error correction methods. I would like you to match the correct method to the correct sample. Mhm. Okay, one is okay. Okay. Somebody's just saying A. What is A? You need to give a number for the A. Like, is A number 1? Is A number 2? Okay, 2A. Great. 4C, is it? Okay. Okay, so here we go. Now let's look at the answers. A, like a lot of people have said, it is reformulation. So if you notice here, a reformulation is basically rephrasing it with a little bit of stress. So, Meera, do you want, shall we just give this a try? You tell me the error and I will try doing the reformulation. You can just read the student. Yeah, just read the student.
Read the sentence. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I met a man. He was an engineer.
Oh, you met a man who was an engineer? So you stress on the corrected version, but you make sure that the volume is higher, the pitch is higher, so that the students get to understand what the error is. And you're also giving them the answer. So instead of just writing it or instead of underlining it, you do a little bit of a more vocal stress on the error. Okay. And the second one, let me see anything for B people have said. B, I haven't gotten a proper answer till now. Okay, let's go for the B.
4B.
We do
Barkha
have?
ma'am has said 4B. Yes.
Oh, awesome. Okay. But B here is your meta-linguistic. So it's third. So it's your meta-linguistic feedback. So meta-linguistic feedback is very similar to the concept checking that you had seen previously, where it's more to do with the terminologies and the rules of grammar. So this definitely, if you are teaching grammar in a very rule-specific manner, this is a very, very good way to go. Then comes C, clarification. So here, Meera, do you want to just give this a try? The student you can read, I'll read the teacher.
I met a man. He was an engineer.
I'm not sure I understand. Can you explain more about the man you met? So what happens here is you're asking them to
Yes.
repeat mainly because you have pointed out an error and you're not explicitly saying that it's an error. So I will come to the pros and cons of this also. I'm not saying each of the technique which is the best or worst. I'll come to the pros and cons. And last, is the eliciting manner. Again, Meena, let's give this a shot.
Yeah. So I met a man, he was an engineer.
Mm, mhm. How would you connect these two ideas using who?
I met a man who was an engineer. Right. So
Absolutely. So what happens there is the pause kind of gives them a little bit of a, warning that, okay, there is something wrong. And you are not actually using the words you are wrong or this is incorrect. So that kind of motivates them also that, okay, there is something wrong. Maybe I'll get a clue now. And I'm sure like a lot of teachers give a lot of clues during classes. So eliciting is very similar to that kind of a process that you guys do. Okay, so now let's go a little deeper into all of these. Reformulation. So, reformulation, the advantages. So, now that you guys know what reformulation is, in the chat box, can you tell me what is the advantage of reformulation? Why is it beneficial for students? Come on, guys, let's hear it. Very nice. Good. Absolutely, Radhika. Not intimidating for a child at all. Very nice. I mean, that comes from a very psychological perspective, and I really like that. Yeah.
so when it's not intimidating, it's actually encouraging the child to, correct himself.
Yeah. And that kind of facilitates such a natural flow of learning. Like when
Yes.
you're not in a fear state, it's a much easier way to learn. There's better understanding. Absolutely. Fantastic, guys. So, like most of you have said, it definitely is promoting natural learning, self correction. And if you notice, there's never a hindrance in the communication flow. The student talks, the teacher stresses, the student understands, and then the whole communication is like packed wonderfully. And do you think there's any issues with this? Any potential problems that we could face? I like that, Deepa. Deepa's like, no, no issue. Okay. Well, to be honest, like
Okay.
everything does come with a pros and a cons. It's up to us to really decide, which one to pick. What do you think, Meena? Do you think there's any issue with
I
this?
think really small children sometimes, or even older children, when they do not know the concept, have
Mhm,
not understood the concept, they can get a little confused why the
mhm.
teacher is, repeating the sentence this way. What was my error? So they may
Yeah.
not be able to understand that. So it can create some confusion. Oh, it's there.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, and if I think somebody else had also mentioned, if you don't stress on the right word, then that's a problem. So the teacher needs to be
Yeah.
very careful on where you're stressing. Very good input there. And yes, there is also a pattern that sometimes children get used to that the teacher always corrects on the board or always underlines. So when a student is used to that explicit way of correcting, and when you start doing this, they feel like, oh, maybe I didn't make any mistake. So you need to also tune the pattern of correction to for them. So lack of explicitness also means that maybe you've been doing explicit correction earlier, and when you're changing it into a reformulation, they may just take a little time to understand it. Okay, moving on to meta-linguistic feedback. So meta-linguistic feedback is extremely good for higher levels because they get the concepts really clear in their mind. Now let's see in the chat box, what could be the benefit of meta-linguistic feedback? What is the benefit that you guys think of meta-linguistic feedback? Creative
Creative
thinking.
thinking.
Mhm. I would change the word creative, Radhika, to probably critical thinking. Yes. Oh, thanks. She immediately changed it. Yes, yes, Radhika, absolutely. Okay. Self-evaluation, very good. Okay. Less time consuming. Mm-hmm. I'll come to that. What do you think, Meena? Time, is it advantage here or a disadvantage here?
I think this could be a little more time consuming because from my experience as a teacher, I've seen that, when we direct the conversation like this,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, children tend to, of course, it promotes critical thinking. And for them, thinking, they need to be given wait time to think.
Yeah,
So it could be time consuming, is what I feel.
absolutely. So here, in
They have
fact,
to recollect the concept.
yeah, here, in fact, the teacher takes such a big role of a facilitator and gets the confidence and trust from the kids that you're there to help them. You're there to just hold it together for them. So one, like many of you guys said, critical thinking, it really encourages critical thinking. They don't really blindly write the rules and just fill the activities and move on. They'll know the grammar terminologies, they'll know the concept behind why they are doing something, and understanding it in such a form kind of gives a longer retention, yes, deeper understanding of the topic, and they retain it. Like it's not a very just an exam focused concept that's gone in, but they retain it for a much longer time. So what about the issues, guys? Do you think there are any issues here?
One, I would think, Ambika, what we
You
discussed
said
just now, that
time
it could be
consuming.
time
Yeah,
consuming.
absolutely. Anything else? Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody has been agreeing with time. Okay. Yeah, it does take absolutely better for higher grades. I agree as well. There could also be a slight interruption of the communication flow because you are stopping them, giving them like a little bit of a question, and then asking them to think. So they might be not continuously talking. They have to pause what they're doing, think, and then talk. So here, I think it could be a very good thing because they are thinking and then talking to you. So this is again how you look at it. So for me, I don't think interrupting communication flow is so much of an issue in such a case because they're actually thinking during that time. And time consuming, yes, I would agree. But yet again, if you set it up as a pattern and if you've gotten the kids used to such a error correction, it could be very beneficial because they immediately adapt. That's one brilliant thing with kids.
And they actually enjoy this way of learning because,
Yeah.
unless until they feel threatened by the teacher, they are
Yeah.
very happy learning this way because, it makes them independent, makes them think.
True. I agree. I absolutely agree. And now let's look at, so I've put the C and D together, which is clarification and eliciting, because they are almost similar. So here, what do you think? What are the advantages of clarifying or asking them a question, eliciting an answer? The pause and then asking them a question which will drive them or give them a clue into the answer. Mm-hmm. Okay.
They
Mm-hmm.
start thinking in multiple ways, a teacher has said.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, critical thinking, understanding. Anything else other than the critical thinking, understanding part? Think of it from the point of view of a teacher also. So, you as a teacher, how could you benefit from something like this? Absolutely. Analysis of their understanding. I love that point. Absolutely. So, analyzing how much they have understood from what you've taught. And this can be done right in any class. And it's just about how you kind of tune your language. So, this is great. That's absolutely great. So, yes, like many of you said, self correction, autonomy. Again, they feel that they are in the power. And when they answer it correctly, they feel like, oh, yes, I can actually do this. And issues may be sometimes they may not understand it's an error and it could be a little bit confusing, but otherwise I think this is a very tried and tested method which I think is quite good to go as well. Okay, so now guys, let's try and give this a shot. Okay, let's try and do one of these reformulation or how do we correct an error. Let's give it a shot. So before we do that, I'm just going to show you, we will be addressing 3 questions in this activity. So this is again taken from the grade 7 book of Burlington English. And before we do that, how about reviewing a little bit of relative pronouns and probably a little bit of possessive pronouns as well? Shall we? Okay. So Madhu, don't give me the answer right away. I'm going to anyway give you the error that the student makes. So don't worry about it. So, which relative pronoun, listen to my question, teachers. Which relative pronoun do we use to show possession? Which relative pronoun do we use to show possessions? Absolutely. Fantastic. It's whose. Okay. Next. Who is one of the relative pronouns we use for people? Can you tell me any others that we use for people? Who is one that we use for people? That, very good. And whom, fantastic. That and whom, absolutely. Now give me the last one, okay? One more. Let's try one more. Can you give me 3 possessive pronouns? 3 possessive pronouns. Mine, good. His, hers. What about if it's not for a person? What do we use there? It's fantastic. Great. Okay, so this also is available in all the textbooks. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. For each grade, you have the pronouns explained in different manners, and you have simplified columns also in your books, which is much easier to get the concepts. So now that all of you, I know that all of you are pros in your pronouns and things, we're going to give it a shot to correct the errors, okay? So this is the answer written by your students. Clearly, they have made mistakes in this, and this is the correct answers. So I would like you to give this a shot by saying the first one in your chat box, if you were to reformulate it, how would you correct this? If you're going to try reformulation, how would you correct this? Yeah, who is the answer? But when you're reformulating it, how would you correct it? What is that one specific thing we said? Meena, do you want to give that a shot? How would we correct the first one?
Let me try. Do you know anyone which might want a puppy? Do you know anyone who might want a puppy?
Yeah, so you stress on the who. So you said, oh yes, so you can answer the question for the student also and say, oh yes, I do know a person who might want a puppy. So what you do is you make exactly. Thank you. The who in the chat box kind of tells me that you definitely can stress on that. So stress on the answer. Yes, the answer is already there. I just want you to tell me how will you use the technique that we did. Okay. So the second one, I would like you to tell me how will we use eliciting for this. For the second one, how would we use eliciting technique? Eliciting is basically clarifying and asking. So, what kind of a question, or pausing and asking, what kind of a question do you think would be appropriate for number 2? Eliciting. While eliciting, what should we do? The answer is where. How would we elicit this? So, which means we know where. When do we use the pronoun where? To indicate what do we use it, guys? Place, absolutely. So what you can do is here, yes, stress with a or are you sure? And then you can ask them a question like, think about it, for a university, do you think it's a place or do you think it's a thing? And then you would get the answer saying, oh yes, it's a place. So if it's a place, then what would you use? Yes, absolutely. Are you sure about your answer? What pronoun do we use for a place? Yes. Fantastic. So that's exactly how we elicit. We've got quite a lot in the chat box. Great. And now we come to the last one, which meta-linguistic feedback. So here, remember the kind of question in the rules that we had posted, the CCQ? So similar to that, can you come up with a question for the third one? To give you a hint here, mainly you will have to talk about the difference of who and whose. So remember in my quiz questions, you all said what whose was. Okay. Okay, very good. Possession, yes. Okay, so you can also directly give them options like, do you think it's whose or that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so here what we could do is the teacher can say the rule, basically who is used for the subject, but here you're talking about possession. So which relative pronoun do you think we should use for possession? And then if you don't get the answer, then give them a choice like how you did. That or whose, whom or whose. Yeah, so it can be either. I think I have a question here. So meta-linguistic feedback is something that completely revolves around your grammar terminologies, and it is something that you always emphasize on the rule. And for this, you will definitely need the students to be aware of what a verb is, or if you're talking about relative pronoun, you may need to make sure that they know what a relative pronoun is. Okay, I hope I've answered that. Yes. Okay, so now let's go into how we can execute these strategies. So we know the strategies, we know who's doing it, we know the teachers are going to be doing it, and how we are going to basically use the strategies. Now somebody just asked me, okay, so let's go into the strategies part of it. So the first one, I think already I did see some people do this. Type this on your chat. The facial expressions, a teacher's facial expressions is the best way to give them a slight indication that there is some problem with the sentence. So you may shake the head. You may frown. Are you sure? Not frown so much to intimidate them, but just look of a doubt, like, are you sure? And then you could go into the sounds. The sounds basically can be, yes, your pauses, your I think some um I probably Kriti won't use na or no. I think that's just my personal belief that I don't use no's and it's wrong in my classroom. I would say, are you sure? Uh-huh. So these are my choice of words that I do. And you could repeat it. You could definitely repeat and ask, how is this possible, and what is are you sure, in the clarification that we saw. Stressing the mistake, which is again your reformulation that you can go into. And the other technique that is quite useful is also the finger correction. I'm not sure if many of you would have done this earlier. So, finger correction is definitely another technique that I prescribe for grammar. So, split whatever the sentence you have, the words, into the fingers. So, for example, the let's take the sentence from a previous activity. Do you know anyone which might want a puppy? So that was the error. So you will have, do you know anyone which might want a puppy? So you'll split it into 8. And where the which comes, one, you can just put this down and say, which means there is an error in this word. And then how would you go about it? Another one is probably, if there is a word that is missing, you can hold this finger and say, like, what is the word? Like, there's something missing on this. What is this? Another one is basically maybe not this, like cross your finger, or, to show that it's incorrect. So the finger technique is definitely helpful for your lower classes as well. Especially, I think in the beginning, I had one question of how do I correct the sentence structure or something. So doing the structuring through finger technique is definitely beneficial as well. And if you have a word extra in the sentence, you can just do and just do and throw away that finger.
That's
So if you
interesting.
are, yeah, I mean, if you are teaching kids, you need to be animated yourself. So you can just take it and just gone. So then they just bring in the, sentence along with, I mean, by eliminating that word. So yes, those are some of the techniques that you can definitely use. And this is all about the execution, the approaches we've seen. Now, let's see, when do we need to really do the corrections? Do we do the corrections every time there is an error? Do we do the corrections when we finish the class? What is the appropriate time of doing corrections? So, again, here, there's a little bit of a task for you teachers. So this basically comes in two ways. One is delayed correction, the other is spot error correction. So I have put down here six, let's say, sentences, which each of them is either related to delayed or spot. Okay. And in this, the first one alone, I'm going to give you a small heads up. So delayed correction basically means you do the correction much later. Spot is you immediately do. It's as simple as the word it is. The first one, you make a note of the error and correct after the student finishes the activity. Is that a D, which is delayed, or is that an S, which is spot? What do you think? Very good. It's delayed. Now read the second one and tell me, is it delayed or spot? Second one. Very good. Most of you are right. The second is also delayed. Second, teacher may hold a dedicated feedback session. So what happens? You gather all the errors that you get and then you have put them all together and then you do a delayed correction. And the third one, guys? Third one is a delayed spot.
Most of them are saying spot.
Fantastic. It is spot. So in a spot correction, you're focusing on the accuracy part of it. So even if it is speech or even if it's written, even if it's grammar, you actually correct it on the spot. Fourth one. Fantastic. So it's a very good way of actually doing it in the grammar and the pronunciation classes. You can just immediately go into your spot. Then the fifth one.
There's a mixed response
I
here.
know, I know. Okay. So the fifth one is delayed. So this method, because fluency is something that you shouldn't interrupt. Fluency usually is affected when there is anything that externally affects it. So that creates a hesitation in speaking. And the minute you keep correcting them, they just step back and they just stop talking. So that could really be, a fluency could be affected. So which is why here delayed is a better option. Sixth one.
They've already given the answers, Ambika, for the
Oh,
sixth one.
fantastic.
Spot.
Superb. Great. Okay, we've got it here. Okay, so you have the answers here right there to have a look. So now that we've seen who gets to correct, how we do the corrections, when should we do the corrections, how do we execute the corrections, tell me, is it ideal to just stick to one type of error correction? Should we just stick to one type or should we follow a pattern? What's your opinion? Oh my God. Session is The takeaway is already there. Absolutely, guys. We have to mix it up. And ideally, sticking to a pattern, some of you are saying pattern, could be a little bit of a problem because children get very used to patterns very fast. So give them challenges. So when you have like variety, they're also challenged. And nowadays, like kids always want new things. So giving them a little bit of critical thinking can always be helpful. And why should we do this? And here's why, a few reasons why it is definitely important to do it. One, they adapt. So for different classroom activities, you can use different ways of corrections. For instance, immediate teacher correction might be more suitable for a grammar, whereas a peer correction for a group discussion. So you can choose the activities needed according to your class's context. Okay. And Meena, what do you think about the second one, about the feedback?
Um, I think combining the methods will ensure that, they get feedback immediately
Mhm.
after, once the error is, there is, um, they get opportunity to think critically about the language use.
Absolutely, absolutely. And by doing this, you're mainly doing, I think one person had mentioned the correct word. It's a holistic learning approach. Like you're
Yes.
developing so many skills at the same time, you know? So it's a very integrated level of teaching. Absolutely. And it definitely makes them feel the autonomy. It also gives them a little bit of power to correct and to understand the language in a more critical way. And it also helps in a way that if you have different learning needs for the different learners, this definitely facilitates, you know, how you want to address this kind of a group, how you address the other group. So you have so many options. Like literally, we've given you like a treasure trove of options from which you can choose for your learners as well. So that definitely helps even in this. Okay. So we are reaching the last 1 minute of our time. And let's do a little bit of a recap. Let me see how many of you guys fully were aware of the flow of our speech today as well. So, can you rearrange the topics in this slide in the order as how we addressed it in the session? Can you rearrange this?
They can just put the numbers, right?
Yeah, you can just put the numbers. Mhm.
516. Yeah. So most of them have said 5 at the top, but there's a
Mhm.
mix of the rest.
Yeah. Okay. And here we go. Yes, we looked at reasons, who should correct the error, how the error correction is done, when to correct the error. We reviewed a little bit of a quiz of the pronouns, and we ended it with how we're going to apply these errors into our teaching as well. So I'm hoping that all of you can take back really good methodologies that we've discussed today, and you're going to really feel that you have more right now to identify and teach the different methods to the students. I'm just going to. There's one question that's repeatedly coming in. I'm just going to take them through one of the things. Can you just give me a second? So, the person who's been asking for that and which. So,
I
if
think
you
it was
notice
Meghna,
here,
ma'am.
yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't check the name, but I keep seeing that. So, for that, we use it mainly for people, animals. So, that is kind of a common thing that we use quite a lot. We use it for people, we use it for thing. So, that is like a go-to relative pronoun, very honestly, because it has multiple uses. whereas in which it is much more specific to animals and things, and you will be using it, you will not be using it as dynamically as that, because that we use even with people, but we don't use which with people. Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I hope you all have also had a good session. And I hope that you can definitely take in some of these inputs into your classrooms. And wish you guys all the best. Thanks, Meena.
Thank you, Ambika. Thank you, everybody.